Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Today I have a new genre makers game for you. What is the series, you ask? Well, for those of you who are new to the channel or series, this is where I take a look at genres and try to find games that help define or redefine how we look at them. These are the games that made the games that we play, defining and redefining the underpinnings of them in one way or another. And today is no exception, because today we're going to go back into the world of platformers. This is one that Nintendo has often defined and redefined over the years with Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 3, and in some ways Super Mario Bros. World. And well, the 3D space is really no exception, because today we're going to talk about how they defined how we look at the 3D platformer with Mario 64. So if you have a minute, sit back and hang out a while as we dive into 3D platforming at its early beginnings and how the team at Nintendo gave us something that influenced it since it first started coming into its own. Now, in the mid-1990s, there was a big push away from the traditional 2D graphics that had dominated the market since it first began in the 1970s. However, with this fifth generation of consoles, it seemed to want to do something different. They wanted to move away from the 2D models of the past and explore three-dimensional worlds. Each console had their own signature titles that used it. Saturn had titles like Knights, PlayStation had Crash Bandicoot among other titles, and Nintendo, well, as always, they had Mario. This time, Mario wouldn't be doing his own two-dimensional adventures, he would be bounding into the new and mostly unknown world of 3D platforming in the form of Mario 64. Launched in 1995 alongside the console with only one other game, Wave Race 64. This new console that they made was designed to primarily do 3D games, which was a vast departure from consoles like the PlayStation and Saturn, which could more easily handle both. As such, Nintendo had to make a big splash and really nail selling the market on 3D games as a whole. To that end, they spent their time crafting Mario 64. This was many gamers' first exposure to 3D gaming, myself included. Seeing the world this way was an eye-opener at the time. Mario felt natural at the time. The fluid movement and seeing all the original characters in 3 dimensions was a new one for all of us. What was even more eye-opening is how you could control and move the camera in the world as we knew it. The camera control itself was a big deal at the time. This allowed the player to angle and see the world around them more effectively. This was done in this way in large part due to the way the controller that Nintendo designed to explore these new worlds on their console was built. Now, this was a fairly maligned controller, being both too large and somehow too small at the same time for many people, primarily due to its unique 3-pronged design. Now, those of you who know, well, you know, but indulge me for a moment as I inform the rest of the class. You see, the controller was set up to have a D-pad and button layout much like their other controllers, though this one had 6 face buttons, A and B being the largest by far, and the 4 C buttons were there. Most of them often used to control the camera in 3D games. Now I know what you're thinking, why not use a second analog stick, you ask? Well, that's because it didn't have one. The controller, much like a lot of early 5th generation consoles, didn't have analogs, or had one at best. This was great to include because of the fine controlled movement that Mario could do in this game. He could run, he could walk, he even tiptoe depending on how hard you press the actual analog stick, which was on the central stock of the controller. Now, this required that your hands be much closer together overall, and you really did need to hold it this way to access the Z button on the central stock, which often had your main action tied to it in the 3D games for convenience. This is often why the controller is so maligned. Most of your time was spent using the center stock and the right buttons, which many gamers left their hands feeling cramped or, in some cases, almost unable to play. Later on, PlayStation would come out with a DualSense controller in 1997 that would push a lot of this forward. Matter of fact, I have a whole video on that if you are so inclined. However, in this case, it did push forward controller design like I had spoken on, leading PlayStation to, well, kind of one-up them a little bit further down the road. However, what do you guys think of Mario 64? Were any of you fans of this game? Do you think it did as much to push 3D game forward as I've talked about, or do you think another game that's in play is more influential? What other games do you think really pushed gaming forward in this space? Let me know in the comments. While you're there, if you don't mind, please leave this video a like And if you see more of my content you like, either on the page or on this video now, consider following the channel. Until we meet again though, thank you so much for spending part of your time with me, and till we meet again, happy gaming!